Hello folks, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 released just yesterday, and with it has come a wave of player reviews, both good and bad. There were of course a handful of critic reviews released just a few days ago, also ranging from good to bad. But as of now, we can begin to get a much better idea as to how Bloodlines 2 is being received, how it may have sold, and what this means moving forward. So, let's get started. Now, it's no secret that Bloodlines 2 has had a rocky development cycle, originally being announced by Paradox in 2019, and the development team at the time were Hardsuit Labs. Over the course of the years, the creative director for Bloodlines 1 and subsequently Hardsuit Labs were all fired and then later on replaced with the Chinese room developers instead. The entire development process did have far more complications, but this would appear to be the most pivotal in regards to Bloodlines 2 changing shape so much, and likely the biggest contributing factor to its lackluster launch. This screenshot here was taken last night, where the total reviews sat at just under 1,000 and the overall rating is 51%. Earlier on, it was around 750 reviews with 47% instead, so it did improve during this time. As of today, the total reviews now sit at nearly 2,200, with the overall rating being 56%. So things are improving for the most part, and given the total reviews is likely to climb to maybe 4,000 or 5,000 over the next week or so, if it continues on this trajectory, it may just make an overall positive review score a little bit sooner than expected. Now, looking into what these reviews are specifically addressing, in a lot of these negative reviews, players remark on the game's lack of depth in multiple different ways. We have the fact it's not faithful to the first game, and we have that it has basically no RPG mechanics, with the overall consensus being this is a disservice to Bloodlines fans. With some of the positive reviews also remarking that the game should never have been named Bloodlines 2, despite them still enjoying the experience. Beyond this, the other negative reviews touch on high price points for each edition, that the game appears to be a quick cash grab made by Paradox, it doesn't last long in regards to length, being roughly 15 to 30 hours, depending on how much you do. And then various other reviews regarding performance, but mostly that there is no FOV slider, no way to turn off motion blur, and various other performance/quality of life issues. Now, it should be noted here that this was going to happen regardless of how good Bloodlines 2 actually is or isn't. It's gotten to the point where it is questionable if any version of Bloodlines 2 would have struck well with longtime fans at this point, but that is likely just down to how badly this game has been managed since it was announced. The writing has been on the wall for well over a year that the vast majority of longtime fans are not happy with this sequel in various different ways. Some more than others, but ultimately enough fans are upset that this version of Bloodlines 2 was always going to receive heavy criticism. In its most simplistic description, Bloodlines 1 is a true RPG game with many different RPG elements, albeit it was made in 2004, lacked some depth and was rough around the edges. The fact still remains, fans wanted a very similar experience. But Bloodlines 2 is absent of just about every mechanic that made the original game what it was, and just based on this alone, the game was always going to quote-unquote fail to some degree. It should also be added that the Chinese room devs were aware of this and did want to change the name from Bloodlines 2 to something more appropriate. However, Paradox said no, which further enforces the cash grab and or simply just using the name in hopes of pushing sales, etc. Now, despite this negative cloud, had it have brought enough to the table on its own, then it very well could have plowed through the negativity and still made a name for itself. However, it appears this isn't the case, and the actual execution here is leaving a lot to be desired. If we head over to SteamDB, the release numbers for concurrent players comes in at 27,000, and given my experience in this field, I'd say Bloodlines 2 is not likely to exceed this number. The mixed review score, low metascore, high price point, plethora of other recent big releases, and the simple fact it's a AAA game that took over 6 years to develop would all suggest these numbers will likely not get much higher, if any higher at all, and that the game has very likely not sold as well as either the Chinese room devs or Paradox would have hoped. I don't like hazarding guesses, but Steam are one of only 5 or so different platforms that Bloodlines 2 is available on, and the fact it comes in at just 27,000 concurrent players would suggest the total figures are somewhere between maybe 75,000 and 150,000 units. This at least sounds sensible to myself when you factor in Xbox and PlayStation, and then the Epic and GOG launchers that the game is also available on. An additional side note here would be that the game was available to pre-order many years ago, and thus a good chunk of the current player base would have ordered their copy a long time ago, and this will have taken away from the current sales figures. Beyond this, I wouldn't really know if the game has been successful or not, but given the low player count, mixed review score, and general sense of disappointment from a portion of the player base, I'd have to say things do not look great, and it's likely a little bit of a disappointment for both Paradox and the Chinese room devs. What this means moving forward would be anyone's guess. Interestingly enough, when Paradox reversed the decision to lock 2 of the 6 playable classes behind the Premium Edition paywall, they did simultaneously introduce alternative rewards for the Premium Edition, being 2 separate story expansions that have you playing as 2 different prominent figures from the main game. Now that launch has arrived and things don't look great, it does raise some question marks around this future DLC and whether it will actually come to fruition or not. None of this is to say it won't, and I don't mean to talk all doom and gloom. Things aren't necessarily very bad for Bloodlines 2, but launch certainly hasn't been great, and I can see it's going to be an uphill battle for this game, should the developers choose to, or be allowed to continue working on it. It's still very early days, and despite the negativity, Bloodlines 2 is going absolutely nowhere. Outside of all Bloodlines 1 related comparisons, it does appear to be a decent game by itself, and it should be noted that not all negative reviews remark on it being a bad game. They mostly just don't like the experience and wanted something different instead. Which is to say, for newcomers or fans of vampire games in general, there's definitely a good game here for you, should you like what you see. Albeit the price point is quite high, and its longevity and future are not entirely certain. To add to this, just recently I was informed by one of my sponsors being Games Planet that a discount they have in place for Bloodlines 2 is no longer available, as I was, to some degree, going to promote this to you all. The reason it is no longer available would apparently be down to either Paradox pulling it or changing the price purchase for these platforms, as it now appears that Bloodlines 2 is completely unavailable outside of platform stores such as Steam, Microsoft, etc. I could be a little bit wrong here. I'm only going off a vague message from my sponsor and a few different things I've read online, so as to what this all actually means, I couldn't really say. After covering Bloodlines 2 for the past couple of weeks, I've begun to see just how much players do dislike Paradox as a whole, and whilst I haven't even begun to dive into the rabbit hole that is Paradox's bad practices and greedy mentality, from what I have seen, it's clear that Bloodlines 2 was always on unstable ground, simply just because it is controlled by Paradox. My personal opinion on the matter, which I don't give often, would be that you should really look into exactly what Bloodlines 2 is, and then base your decision on that. Anyone writing this off as entirely bad is wrong, and anyone claiming this is perfect would also be wrong. Gaming is of course subjective, so some may truly hate it or love it 100%, but this isn't a good referral for the average gamer, and what I think is most important is understanding what the gameplay actually is, how deep it truly goes, and then going from there. A quick summary of that would be 6 skills per clan/class and 6 clans in total. You can acquire all abilities in one single playthrough. Combat is very similar to BioShock or Dishonored and makes up roughly 50% of the gameplay, whilst the other half is made up entirely of dialogue. Outside of this, there is very little exploration, character customization, or general RPG mechanics, but the combat, dialogue, overall theme, art style, sound design, etc. are all very well done. As I say, you should look into this more yourselves before deciding, as there are currently quite the abundance of polar opposite reviews for this game. Moving forward, I'll be keeping a close eye on all developments and will promptly report them all here. Hopefully, I do have some better news on the next video. We are currently awaiting announcements regarding updates, how Bloodlines 2 has been received, as well as future plans, etc. Whether we actually get any of these, and to what extent would be anyone's guess for now, but if and when they do appear, I will of course report on them. As for the channel itself, we are moving on to Arc Raiders with its release set for the 30th of October, where similar to Bloodlines 2, I'll be covering a lot of the game prior to launch, and then of course further news coverage once it has released. And then the same can be said for Where Winds Meet, which is set to drop next month. Of course, alongside all of this, we do also have Kazan, Wu Chang, Cronus The New Dawn, Hollow Knight Silksong, Dying Light the Beast, and 1 or 2 other titles on the channel already. With time, this number will continue to grow, and hopefully so will the channel. Anyway, that would be it for this one, folks. I'll be back soon with plenty more, and I do of course have a range of guide and news videos on the channel already, so do feel free to stop on by and check things out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, folks, and until next time, peace.